Welcome to another episode of Sudbury Politics, the show. Today we're joined by Sudbury Member of Parliament Paul Lefebvre. In the midst of the Laurentian crisis, his government's COVID response, and the promotion of a behemoth federal budget, Paul set aside an hour to talk with hosts Jeff MacIntrye and Richard Eberhardt about those big topics and about moving on from his seat in the House of Commons. It's a conversation you won't want to miss on this very special episode of Sudbury Politics, the show.
All right. Welcome back to Sudbury Politics, the show. It's going to be a great episode tonight. We got a very special guest. Paul Lefebvre is joining us to talk about Laurentian, the budget, and all things Sudbury politics. I've got Richard here co-hosting. Richard, how you doing?
Hey, Jeff. No beers too early in the day.
Yeah. And Paul, how are you?
I'm well. Considering everything, I'm doing okay. How about yourselves?
It's interesting times.
Very interesting times for sure. Yes.
But not as, let's just say there are a lot of other things we could be doing at this point in the spring other than having this relaxed, candid chat, right? And so I don't election timing and all that is a lob ball at anybody's guess. But some of those guesses would have us being, doing other things right now. You particularly, with whoever candidate is going to be standing up to replace you, and so, but a politics show would be busy with candidates as opposed to with sitting MPs. So I guess we could just take that and appreciate that for what it is, a more restful spring than it could be, even despite all the turmoil.
Exactly. No, exactly. Certainly, as you can imagine, certainly everything going on. But like you said, we had a budget last week, and certainly lots in there. It's over 700 pages, and certainly more than happy to discuss that and with you guys. And certainly the situation at Laurentian that is unfolding is extremely difficult and extremely challenging, extremely frustrating. And I'm more than happy to certainly give you my perspective on that and to answer any of your great questions. So happy to be here and certainly to engage.
Jeff, can I start? I just want to say, let's cast. There's so much attention to everything that happened from February 1st to now. And I always feel like at this point we're already caught in the trap. As soon as that insolvency process was started, we're kind of there's nowhere we can go. We're stuck with what we've got. And despite legitimate calls for that process to be stopped, for other actors to get involved, and for individuals that are ultimately responsible to be held accountable, on February 2nd, it's almost kind of for now too late. So I just want to start, Paul, with casting back, if there was a place where the path could have diverged for Laurentian University, that you could have been involved in, or just watching like the rest of us, where would that have been along the way?
Well, certainly that's a great question, Richard, because I think at the end of the day, certainly as this process, as you said, on February 1st, this all started, and and you're right, an applicant, Laurentian University, applied for protection under CCAA. And now there's a whole process that gets involved, and after that, trying to get inside of that certainly is impossible. As a politician, there's a judge. I can't go to the judge and say stop the process. There's an applicant and there's a process. That being said, I think we need to certainly. I think time will tell, and I think it's a bit too early. Richard, to be honest with you, because I think we'll see how much communication was between Laurentian and the province, and to say this is the situation. We have no solution. This is going to happen. We can't make payroll. We need help. What's going on? We need your help. Are you going to intervene? And they let the process start. Even though, did they know? Did they not know? I guess time will tell of all of those details. If that could have changed, if the province would have intervened, knowing, I think, again, and hopefully we're going to talk about certainly process and how do we avoid this again. But certainly what's going on here right now, looking back, I don't think we had the measures, or certainly the law wasn't on our side, or on any of us, or on the community side to stop it to get in there. The only people that had that power, to me, was the province. Because they have funding that they could have certainly said, well, listen, are they on the hook or not? As the province, are they ultimately responsible to make sure to keep the university whole and to keep it going? Obviously, they made a decision that they did not have that responsibility and to let the university go through the CCAA process. So again, this is the first time ever that a public institution, which is Laurentian, and is it public or not? Is it quasi-public because they do obviously get funds from students, right? It's a non-for-profit. You can say, but I qualify it as a public institution. They get government funding. They provide government services, which is education, post-secondary education. So I think that's where if we look back, and then if we want to look even further back and seeing how did we get here? Right, even from a financial position, and certainly I think COVID. We know that the cuts, the 10% cuts to tuition from the Ford government. We're looking at the Barrie situation. We're looking at infrastructure that was built over the years. We're looking at international students. To me, it's a series of things. Again, time will tell. We're going to find that out but I think from all the comments that I've seen and I've heard, certainly that's how we got here financially from Laurentian, and the province obviously was aware of it and didn't do anything about it.
One of the strangest things I find about this, because you don't go into the CCA or CCAA process blind, right? You know what you're getting into once you get there. You know the second you start, you got to shut up and you're going to be handcuffed. I just can't believe, I can't wrap my head around, nobody at Laurentian raised the red flag high enough before they were locked into this process to say, look, if we don't do something, we're going to CCAA and it's going to mean program cuts. Was a flag raised with you guys at any point?
Well, certainly the processing, like what can you do to help us with the funding? Saying, well, here's our lane. Here's what we do with funding, right? Certainly on Francophone programming, right? And on bilinguals, as a bilingual university, we have funding for that, but it goes through the province, right? On research as well. These are the lanes that we can help you with. But at the same time, the province is the one that you need to talk to about certainly any issues with respect to operational financing. The federal government has never provided any operational financing to any university at any point in time in the history of Canada. And so certainly that in the small conversations that I had saying, you talk to the province, here's what we can do. And here are certainly things that we're more than happy to engage in conversations, and that did not go any further.
Were they cleared that how bad it was? Like, 'cause I think even think the imaginations of the community when this all started weren't really focused on clearly enough on how bad it's going to be even halfway through the process, right? Were they able to articulate, whoever came to you, were they able to say like, Paul, this is gonna be bad. Like, we're gonna be cutting 65 programs here.
Never.
We're gonna be fine.
No, that never occurred. And exactly. And it's basically, what is the amount? Is it 200 million? Is it 50 million? Is it 25 million? Is it 100 million? No amounts were ever certainly of that nature. And so, but yeah, certainly, I think on April 12th is when we're all of us as community members, we're going through the process, and on April 12th, wow. Then that's when saying, because I was quite, obviously my position was quite clear, saying let the process go, I can't intervene. But on April 12th, like, oh my good Lord, that we never imagined to go to that extent. And I'll be honest, I'm quite concerned, because what is the effect of this on student recruitment for the next year, the year after that? And if your revenues keep going down, what situation will we be in? And that's a conversation that I'm not hearing, and that has me really worried as a member of our community, as to certainly as to see what can we do to help that out. And we've been quite clear, again, in our lane on the research side and on the on Francophone programming and supports, that we are there. Certainly we've had the Minister Joly since the beginning has been quite clear. We want to have a conversation with the province, but again, because it's in the process, we got to wait till it ends before we can have more results. But in the process, I know there are conversations that have been happening. Certainly I can't get involved, but at the minister's level, I think they've tweeted about it themselves, that they have met. But again, Minister Joly has been quite clear. It is on her. She is not the minister of post-secondary education of the country. There is no department. There is no minister. She is Minister of Official Languages. So francophone programming, strong francophone programs is what that she's concerned about. And that given the situation here at Laurentian is something that's why being a pillar of Ontario when it comes to certainly bilingualism and francophone programming, and that's why we have major concerns about that.
I think you touched on some issues that I think are creating a lot of problems within this discussions right now. People don't realize when you get elected, a set of handcuffs go on you on what you can and can't talk about, because there's divisions of powers between different levels of government. There's maintaining, government positions and things like that. What I've seen happen is politicians of all stripes, not necessarily being 100% clear with what their compatriots can do, right? And making it sound like, if only this person did X and only if this person did Y. And we don't really have anybody in Sudbury that is in the seat of power that has control. The only people in Sudbury that really have control on this is the admin at the university, and that's about it, right? Yep. They're the biggest player we have. But there's still a role for lobbying and for, communicating to the province. And I haven't seen that filled by the community leaders yet in a real strong way, bringing together labor and business and the chamber and getting a strong voice to go to the province and say, hey, this process isn't working. We need to start over, or we need to find a different route.
Yep.
Who can be that voice at this point?
That's a great question. And I think, again, going back to my comment saying before April 12th, we thought, okay, a few program cuts here and there, maybe some tough decisions, never the bomb that I will call it that we've seen on April 12th. And so certainly that voice again comes from the community, and we have been hearing that voice, but the province's position has been we can't even engage because there's a process and we can't stop the process. So yet, listen, I've been asked to intervene, as you know, and people have been publicly saying, Paul Lefebvre, you should stand up and stop the whole process. And I've been quite clear, I don't have the ability to do that. The federal government, again, the province is the one that needs to actually ask the federal government for help, and that has never happened. And two, and because it's been quite clear, here's our lanes, here's what we can do to help, and here's our options. But you're right, there hasn't been a concerted voice to coming together. I think last night, from what I can see, the city council came up with a resolution. I just noticed that in the media, to ask certainly for the provincial government to step in, or certainly to take it over to take their responsibilities. But again, they allow the process to start. I can't see them getting involved now to stop it.
I imagine you'll agree with this. If we knew then what we know now, there would have been heaven and earth moved to avoid this situation. I just don't know who failed and for what reason in their ability to express the seriousness of this issue. Right. And we've been trying to peel back everything that we can figure out as time goes on, and you and others and, people all around this issue have been trying to figure out what really the impact is going to be. We could do a little bit of elementary math and we knew it was going to be bad. We just didn't know exactly how bad, but we didn't know that until these court filings came in after the process had started.
Yep.
If we knew then what we knew now, what could have happened differently?
Tough questions. I think the community, if all the cards would have been on the table, if we would have known all the facts and where were we today and where we may be later on. And I think, Richard, you're right. I think that people would have moved heaven and earth to try to avoid this at all cost. Nobody imagined the extent of where we are today, certainly after April 12th. And what could happen again, unfortunately, right? And I think that's why, and I've been on record saying that's why I didn't think, and I still don't think, the CCLRA process is the way that we should that this should have been resolved.
And we all
right?
agree. We all agree on that.
Yeah,
We've already talked. Like I've heard Jeff say it 100 times. I've said it.
yeah,
How
and I've said it.
the
Yeah, yeah,
CC and you said it. You've got a
yeah,
private members bill to make that happen. And
yeah.
what I'm interested to hear from you, because you had to work this bill up.
Mhm.
Talk about the challenges in making the definition that you did to change the bill, because I mean I've read the act, and I know
Mhm.
where the definition needed to change.
Mhm.
Way back as soon as this happened, clearly there's a missing piece that says you can use the CCA for everybody except what is it, telegraph companies and charter banks.
Yeah, pretty
And
much. Yeah.
now
Yeah.
if your bill becomes law, if it's
Mhm.
adopted by the government, or if it works its way through
Yeah.
the process, then we'll add to that public post-secondary institutions
Mhm.
that are drawing funds from provincial or municipal governments.
Exactly. Yeah.
So very careful wording there. Can you talk about that wording? I mean,
Sure. So
because you
yeah,
have a background in this, right? I mean, you probably
yeah, yeah. I'm not a legislator. I'm not a drafter. But I guess, a tax lawyer. So I don't mind legislation and reading the funny long stuff. But in this case, basically, when this happened, and then we started to see the wheels starting to turn and saying, oh my God, like, okay, how can we avoid this happening again? The anxiety that we were feeling back in February, that obviously now is exacerbated with the results that we're seeing. The anxiety, the stress that I've seen with my own family members that work there, and that some of that are students there, some friends of mine that were working there that lost their jobs. So I started to think about it, saying what I can do. But at the time, I was parliamentary secretary to the Minister of Natural Resources, and the parliamentary secretary could not bring forward a bill, right? So I was like, okay, well, not much I can do. At least start thinking about it, and then start seeing what we can do. Then I decided not to run again. So when I did officially resign, and I was no longer parliamentary secretary, I said, hey, this is my chance. So what I did was I contacted the House. There's drafters, there's legislative drafters that we talked to, saying this is the bill that I want to amend. This is what I want to do. So this was early March. I forget the exact date that I started this process. And then they go back and take a week or 10 days, and they look at everything's been done before. And on this one, nothing had ever been approached of that nature, of post-secondary institution to be excluded from the CCAA process. And so they kind of looked around, and then after that, it goes. So they draft the amendment, and then after that, it goes back to me. I look at it, so okay, and then it goes to kind of a professional that is like a clerk with the Library of Parliament, and then he reviews it, or she reviews it, and then gives me feedback as well, saying this would work. These are kind of things that you should be wary about, and these are the effects that this can have. And again, I've been diving deep into this bill. I know there's been some critique as saying, well, you're last on the list, so why the hell this won't go forward? But it hasn't given me the opportunity to have conversations with PMO, with ministers' offices. So, because this, at the end of the day, what I wanted to do is raise this and saying, how do we not be in a situation again across the country, right? And a bill like this would give that results. Now, what are the consequences, right? So when you really think about, it's great that you can't, if post-secondary institutions are not allowed to use CCAA or to go bankrupt, well, what does that mean, right? What's going to happen? Well, to me, the provinces are the ones that will have to wear and take the responsibility and ensure good governance and the viability of our institutions, because universities and colleges are creatures of the province, not the federal government. There are laws created by the province. Now, my concern is that with what we've seen in this situation, again, it's the first time that this has ever happened to a public institution, a post-secondary institution. The banks, the creditors, the main creditors here, they are unsecured creditors. Why are they unsecured? Well, because they never took security on real estate from the university. It doesn't really have fair market value. They can't really, but there's an understanding. There's an underlying understanding that the province is there to back it up. The province is there is supposed to back it up, because if I'm a bank and I'm advancing $5 million or $10 million to an institution and it's unsecured, there's an understanding that the province should be there to back it up. Now, what we've just seen, that's not the case. The province has let the banks, obviously, or the university default, and now I would assume, and I'm doing my due diligence and I'm working on this, that a lot of banks out there that have advanced money to institutions that are maybe precarious financial situation are second guessing themselves, saying, wow, we want out of this business. So what does that mean? So we have, again, if you really think this through and at the next level, as I've done with this bill, saying, yeah, you know what, at the end of the day, it's the responsibility of the province. They need to take responsibility and never allow this to happen again. So there you go. So certainly, again, as I explained to you, the bill, and I think, again, it's allowed me to have conversations of bringing it forward. Again, who knows when the next election will be. It may not obviously come to fruition. I'm trying hard that this become a government bill. And again, given the length of Parliament, who knows what it will be, possibly in a future Parliament, because I do not think that now that certain provincial governments have realized that they can get away with this, that this will be the last one. And that worries me a lot, given the effect that we've seen here in our community. So that's why this bill is so important, and that we pass it. And if it's not obviously a government, well, and that become a government bill to make sure that this goes forward. I've been rambling on here, but I think it goes. I just wanted to express certainly the work that has gone into in the thought process, and again, taking next steps of the consequences of not doing this, and the consequences of doing this, and where we want to land.
Yeah, I think something a lot of people don't understand is that CCAA is a protective measure for companies, right?
That's right. That's right.
But when you can't pay your bills, instead of seeing a whole bunch of people go unemployed overnight, you put a protection around them so that they can get their house in order and come up with a plan to pay their bills.
Yep.
That makes sense in a private institution. I know Richard will argue that the process doesn't necessarily make sense. But when we're talking about a community asset, you know, as Richard and you both mentioned earlier, had we known where we were going to get, the private sector locally, the local governments, the federal governments, the provincial governments, if this was a public thing, people would have came to the table and said, yeah, we can't afford to lose this. We're going to help. So, you know, what this gets replaced by, I think is important. I think one of the scariest parts of this is how we got this far with a semi-private or public institution. You know, you can try and call it private, but I'm not going to believe you.
It's not private. Like I'm saying, it's like a non-for-profit / because they do raise funds for that. Anyways, there's always a what it is. Yeah,
it's in a weird ether for sure.
Yeah.
But end of the day, it's serving a public good, and you know, there's a lot of public investment in this thing. You know,
tons.
How do we get to the point where we've got an institution like this that doesn't have the openness that these red flags weren't flying everywhere coming into it? You know, I realize the province runs education, but you know, these are public institutions. There's got to be a role for the federal government to say, look, you got to have your books open if you're taking public funds.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good question, and I think the funds that certainly that we've transferred goes with respect to official languages. So on the francophone side, it goes through the province. Like, we do not give funds directly to universities and colleges. We give it to the province, then the province administers it through each provincial government. On the research side, certainly, again, the university is the conduit, right? The researcher is the one that receives it. So the Granting Council of Canada provides, we've actually doubled the amount of funding for research in Canada through universities and colleges. And so it goes through the granting agencies, and then from there it goes through it, and then there's a competition, and there's applicants for different programs, and then they receive the programs based on merit, and then we transfer the funds to the university to obviously then to provide to the researchers. So yeah, but just to go back to your point though, again, given the fact that this is the first time that this happens, and I think I'm also, again, I'm not aware, but I'm not sure, but certainly even the administration saying they did not see, I think, the end game aware of what's going on now, and knowing what they knew too, where they have gone public more than just, you know, just trying to keep it behind closed door and show up on February 1st and saying this is what we're doing, right? Saying we are in a dire situation here. We need the province to help us out.
Yeah, to a certain extent, the analogy I used earlier was it's like we're out to sea and realize they built the boat with a hole in it, and we're stuck in this process now. There's two elements to that. A, don't build boats with holes in them next time, and that's where I think the federal government can have the conversation more, where the provincial governments, hey, you have a boat that's sinking, send somebody to rescue it.
Yep.
Screw the arguments right now.
Yep.
So on your side of things, same way the banks are going to say, hey, we're probably going to want security on the next loan we give to a public institution.
Mm-hmm.
Or, there's a responsibility from the federal government to say, and they do this with other elements that they, healthcare and different things. If we're going to be signing you giant checks, there's standards you have to hit to receive those checks as a province. And, is there any push to change those standards to say, hey, there's got to be more public accountability to these institutions if we're going to be taking this kind of federal money?
Yeah, that's Jeff. You raised something that I've been talking about since 2015, since being elected, the accountability on the funds received by the province from the federal government, right? And certainly, and that is a constant fight with every provincial government on any transfer. I've seen it firsthand, saying even on official languages, saying, "Give us the money." But we're going to be accountable to where it goes. So again, we believe it is going to obviously to official languages and to make sure that the French outside Quebec programs, but at any level, at the health transfer level, right? Any transfer that is being done by the federal government is immediately met with any resistance by any provincial government, certainly Quebec, more than any other, saying, do not tell us what to do with it. We're the ones that this is our jurisdiction. We're going to do it. So I think, but I agree. That's extremely frustrating because here we are, as you said, cutting a check, investing or supporting, and we're hoping. But again, there are agreements. I got to be careful. There are agreements that then there are certainly thresholds that they need to meet. But that is a constant negotiation. I'll give you another example: infrastructure. Right, infrastructure. There are a lot of provincial infrastructure projects that the federal government has invested in, right? And certainly, how do we make them accountable? It's been a challenge with this administration in Ontario for us. They make announcements sometimes. I think it's gotten much better, but for a while, the announcements were being made that it was a provincial government infrastructure announcement, and 90% was coming from the federal government, but there was no mention of it anywhere. But I think we've got, again, it's negotiations and discussions. So a lot of communication, a lot of discussion when that avenue is open to have those discussions in.
Paul, this topic, the topic of holding provinces to account for federal dollars, may be larger than your budget, and it's certainly a big part of your budget too. And I don't want to get too far. We're going to be moving on from Laurentian soon, but I mean, obviously, $30 billion in childcare funding that's going to need to be delivered through the provinces is going to need to have those kinds of checks and balances as much as provincial governments are going to allow in order for those programs to actually succeed and the money to flow. I think the saving grace with that is that Quebec already has its program in place. And so therefore you don't have to try to say to Quebec in its distinct society that you're going to put all these barriers or standards on the money. I just want to swing back very quickly to the political implications of CCAA insolvency for public institutions, because I think, I've been on this right from the start. I don't know if, you kind of mentioned a little bit that the provinces are not just in Ontario, but across the country. I think that we can make a short list of the ones that we think would be the most likely culprits. Would be like, ooh, I can do that now? That's great.
Yeah.
I can just let my public institutions go insolvent. This is fine.
Yep.
I'll tell you and from a bill crafting standpoint, I am also not a legislator. But what I would like to have seen in an amendment to the CCAA is that the primary granting, you could put all kinds of stipulations about how much funding, qualifies you in this category. Your bill didn't do that. It just kind of said that receive funding.
Public funds.
Public funds. So broad category. You could narrow it down. I would like to see the responsible ministry have to sign off on the insolvency, because the biggest thing that I see the benefits the provincial government right now is they can just be like, oh, they declared insolvency.
Yeah,
Wasn't us. We had
yeah,
nothing to do with it. We're not even involved. We're not even at the table. But
yeah.
see, if they have to sign off before the
Mhm,
federal court will certify it, then you, first of all, you satisfy the creditors, right?
mhm. Yeah,
Because there's still a route to insolvency, and you do not satisfy provincial governments that want to hide behind court processes to avoid their accountability to their constituents, which is exactly what's happening here here in Sudbury. So
yeah. No, and that's a good point. Certainly, coming up with the bill is more or less like, again, I wanted to start the conversation, right?
yeah,
I wanted to get the conversation raised at certainly at that level as to how do we make it, how do we make the provinces accountable, and so that's again more open to see any amendments and any improvements to this bill. There's no doubt about that. But I think the conversation is, we listen. Last year we never even thought of having this conversation. Never.
yeah.
None of us would have thought even that this was a real possibility that this could happen. But now we see. And Richard, you're right. That's my main concern. Saying, well, maybe we have some issues with respect to some hospitals, right? Maybe basically they basically, with our transfers to the hospital, we'll cut those, and if they can't make those cuts, well, we're going to basically blow up collective bargaining agreements. These collective agreements. So to me, it's a backhanded way of possibly, now that they see that can be a possibility, and that's why I really think that uh, my bill and certainly our government needs to act upon it. And I've been vocal in caucus and with my colleagues. Hopefully, again, I'm confident it will get somewhere as this goes down the road, or else this will not be the last time, and it should be the last time that this happens to any institutions.
It must be super hard. It's a big country. So, to your credit, it's really hard to get anyone's attention on this. 'Cause I
Hmm.
know, because I tried too. Like, I reached out to, colleagues and former friends and
Yeah.
led MPs that I know, and try to get them to pay attention to this in February. And, it took them a while,
Yeah.
and ultimately, like, there's a pandemic on. There hasn't been a budget in 2 years. We're going to talk
Yep.
about that in a second.
Sure.
Like, there are massive things. This is a countrywide full of stuff going on. Laurentian University this issue can look easily swiped away as provincial jurisdiction, easily swiped away as a one-off. Like, it's easy to push this aside and say, I don't have time for that right now. I got
Mhm.
the big country to run here. I mean, I think that, I wish you luck in getting the minister responsible, which I would imagine is probably finance.
It's
Uh,
finance and I said in
I
industry.
said,
Yeah,
yeah,
I said, yeah,
finance has been a bit busy
yes, with the
lately,
budget. Yeah,
to pay attention to pick up this relatively modest
yeah,
change to
yeah.
an act that Canadians, like, you're not going to win a national election on changing the CCAA.
No.
But Sudbury will care a hell of a lot. So
Yeah, yeah, and yes, but and for sure, again, this for me was, what can I do right now, right? And in the process, there's not much we can do during the process. Saying, okay, well, after the process, what can federal government do? But in general, how can we not this not happen again, right? And so to me, it was like, I mean, it's people have been certainly some of the critique against me certainly. Well, I should have been in rallies and at the forefront, kind of rallying against myself, right? If I rally against myself, it's kind of counterproductive. Saying I'm already having conversation with the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Industry, the PMO. I'm doing my due diligence, sorry, my advocacy, and for those who know me, I'm not the one that rah in the streets. That's not my style. I've doing a lot of more backroom as much as I can, certainly get results. And I think the last 5.5 years, I've spoken. I think the results that we received in our community of all the investments that we have received over almost for $500 million now, and even at Laurentian. Think about that, Laurentian University. That's I think it frustrates me. A lot of the funding that we received from the federal government, I made those announcements. I have been there and I've met with these researchers, and I've funded, certainly I've advocated to certainly the Cliff building, the Cliff Fielding building, which is an amazing place to study. And so there's so many good things that has happened there, and it's so frustrating to see where we are now. And then when I look next year, and the year after and 5 years from now. I want to be optimistic, but right now it's tough to be optimistic. And as I said at many times, I'm going to do everything that I can, in my position to make sure that it's strong, but it's tough. It's frustrating. And I'm angry. I'm seeing the people personally affected by this. And I'll give you a bit of a small story that I got my son's on the when he's 13 years old, and he swims at Laurentian with the Laurentian swim team. And so certainly the pool's closed, a lot of worries about the facilities there. So I got an email as a parent, an email by the swim team to advocate and to lobby members of parliament. And so I got a letter to lobby myself. That's kind of how close we are to this, right? I got an email saying, could you write a letter to your member of parliament and your provincial parliament, anyways, to everybody, but my name was on it. And it just struck me how close we are to this, and how close I am to this. Yeah. So I just wanted to maybe share that story of the frustration and certainly the anger that I'm feeling right now, but at the same time trying to look ahead and trying to say, well, how do I make sure that we don't lose it all, right? So that's that balance that I'm struggling with, or trying to keep the focus on.
Yeah. Well, as much as Laurentian is probably a massive issue for Sudbury, it's not the only massive issue for Sudbury these days. We still have COVID response that we're dealing with. I somewhat wonder what the CCA or CCAA process would look like without COVID and the massive amount of protests that you would expect on campus and down at Queen's Park. That's been held back because of this process.
Yep.
Vaccines are coming, and then they're not coming, and then they're coming because we're getting them from all over the world and different providers. They're starting to get to a different level. Any crystal ball on what level of vaccination we need to get to some normalcy?
Again, I'm not an expert on this. I'm not a scientist, but I will my crystal ball. I think by the end of June, if the vaccines keep coming in, and it looks like they are, Pfizer has been is on record now to say that 2 million. I think this week has been 2 million. I think next week another 2 million. We're going to get to around 15 to 20, even more than I think, and it's actually going to ramp up again in June. So the Prime Minister has been quite clear on this, saying every Canadian that wants a vaccine, that wants the first shot, will get one by the end of June. And we're seeing that in Sudbury, right? I think we're at around 35% of Sudburyans being vaccinated. And as soon as there's a call to say a pharmacy has some, there are lineups. There will always be vaccine hesitancy, but I think it'll be low in our area. That's how I feel. Again, I've been getting calls. We get all sorts of calls in my office saying, well, why are you advocating vaccines, right? And why are you guys having a lottery for vaccines? So anyways, a lot of critique that way, but again, that's a very, very small portion of the population. And I've been quite vocal. Certainly, we need the first vaccine you can get it as fast as you can. And like I said, we've been fortunate here. Very concerning down in Toronto area and Peel area, what's going on in the hospitals there. Listen, the critique certainly can come from. We should have been manufacturing our own vaccines 20 years ago, 10 years ago, right? It's up to the pharmaceutical companies to do that. We are a small market when you look at the global thing, the whole global picture. That being said, in the budget, and we're putting a lot of money in to make sure that we have this independence, that this will never happen again, that we're able to manufacture vaccines for the next time. So this is a lesson learned. There's no doubt about that. Again, 2 years ago, nobody when I was knocking on doors in 2019, let's put it this way, nobody told me you should be investing and make sure that we are producing more vaccines in Canada. I never heard that. None of us did. So anybody, I was at a Zoom conversation and somebody says, oh, we all knew that this was going to happen. No, wow, we knew that there was a pandemic that's going to happen. Where's your crystal ball? And certainly if you can read cards, I want to know, because I want to next. So it's tough, right? But again, I'm optimistic. I'm actually very optimistic by the end of June, by the end of the summer, where I think we'll almost have all be getting our 2 doses. But it's not over, because the world will not be there, right? Now the rest of the world, we need to help the rest of the world out as well. And so what's going on in India is just heartbreaking at this time, and just seeing that people dying in their cars, in their homes, on the streets, it's really, really tough to see. But for Sudbury and certainly the Canada, tough right now, third wave, another lockdown. Yeah, I think we're going to come out of this end of June, during the summer.
COVID and Laurentian both could have benefited from little hindsight 2021. Just going to take just a quick break, and we'll be right back with MP Paul Lefebvre. All right, we're back with MP Paul Lefebvre of Sudbury. Paul, we're really enjoying our conversation. We don't have a lot of time left, but we can't ignore, a budget document that's about yay big, right? I saw them passing these poor pages, passing it out. There weren't as many copies moving their way physically around the House of Commons as there normally are. Usually they need a fleet of these poor kids.
Oh yeah, they all come out at 4 o'clock, right? At 4 o'clock, they are also coming out. Yeah, you're right. I think the English version is this much, and the French version is this much. There's always more words in French, right? And
well, we know some of the top line highlights. We don't have to go through them because people that have been watching this have heard about the big stories. What is on page 250 on? Paul, like, what comes after the initial section that we might not have heard much about and that we need to know about?
I think, well, like you said, though, there's lots there. There's so much investments that we're doing across the country, and certainly in Canadians, and learning from the pandemic. One of the things I think the media's not really picking up on is the training aspect of it. One of the problems we have, I think, in our country is supply of labor. And so basically, we know here, even in Sudbury, the opportunities that there are for skilled labor for jobs. It's stopping us. It's really stopping us to grow our economy, and not only in Sudbury, Ontario, and in Canada. So there's a massive investments in training to make sure that we're able to have anybody that wants to participate in the workforce at that level, to make sure that we have those opportunities. And so that's not really well known, and that's going to be with colleges as well as universities, as well as unions, right? So I think there'll be massive opportunities for training our kids, or anybody, for retraining as well. Because one of the things that we are talking about is, as we transition to a low carbon economy, to a clean economy, saying, well, what are we going to do with the people that work in the oil and gas, right? How do we transition? Well, the funding is there to certainly, as we do more on clean tech. There's so many opportunities. In my former role as parliamentary secretary to the Minister of Natural Resources, I saw the massive interest of certainly our minerals and metals that we have in our country. So how do we get from extraction to manufacturing and put in that, and commercialization? And so there's a lot of supports there for that. It's not clear because it's not sexy, right? It's not, you just can't say we're gonna, we're providing money for long-term care homes. We're providing money for housing. We're providing money for tourism. We're providing money for arts and culture, which are all there, right? So there's lots there. But I think for me, is about how do we grow our economy? How do we make sure that everybody that wants to work is able to work? What social programs that we need to change to encourage more labor participation as well? That's more on a provincial level, but I believe that we've seen in the budget is a massive investment to make sure that we're able to get everybody that wants to participate, that will participate.
One of the things I noticed from the provincial budget that I thought they did right was investing in micro-credentials, and I don't think I saw that on the federal side. I know with more technical jobs or tech-focused jobs, sometimes the university degree doesn't make sense because by the time you're finished it, that job doesn't exist anymore. Mm-hmm. So the movement to micro-credentials of 2-3 month training that gets you job ready for a specific task seems to be on the increase, at least in my sector. Mm-hmm. is there room in the budget for that? I didn't notice it.
Well, I think it's whenever you see a budget, it's very wide. It's a wide net, right? Basically, there's not a lot of specifics. Even though there are 745 pages, they're not. It's very, very general in the sense that we don't get into the nitty gritty of how these programs are going to roll out and what the criteria are. So I think that there's room for that, and that is certainly something that we've heard as well. Saying I have a diploma in this, but I need to kind of retrain, and I don't want to be going back for 2 years to retrain. Can I take a diploma for 2 months, 3 months, whatever it is, right? How do we go about that? But that is usually a provincial responsibility of actually issuing those on the training side. We don't have a minister responsible for training at the federal level. That being said, we're certainly we want to encourage, like as I said, how we can encourage investments in training, and so the diploma side and the recognition side is more at the provincial level to issue those. So I think there's a good match between the province and the feds in the sense of with respect to that combination that is required. And even certainly on cross-border as well between the provinces, right? If I am a welder in Alberta, I just can't come very easily in Ontario. I need to redo the test and sometimes even retrain. We need to be more flexible in that for labor mobility across our own country. Sometimes it's even tougher in our own country than to go work in the States. They'll recognize any provincial degree over there, but between provinces, we don't. Those are we can have a long conversation on certainly our own border issues of trade between our own country. But yeah, I think I agree, Jeff. I think there has to be certainly a conversation there of how we can make sure that happens.
Paul, on the bigger picture, I mean, I know I asked you to flip to page 250, but I'm just looking at the politics side of things. This budget will pass. It'll pass strongly. The official opposition might vote against it. They'll have to explain to their constituents why they don't like things like universal childcare when they do. But how do you you've got financial you've got financial acumen here. Are you uncomfortable with the size of the deficit?
No, because it's not a permanent deficit. It's going to go back down in 2022, 2023 to around $50 billion. And actually that'd be around 2%, less than 2% the size of our national debt. And so I think what the pandemic has done is really lifted off the Band-Aid of the way that we perceive what the spending that the government can do and shouldn't do. Right back in 1995, also Paul Martin came in and refixed the books, but we paid that for that long term, as well as in 2010, after the last kind of big recession in the country of the economic fallout of 2008, 2009, all the levers to kind of to stimulate the economy were ended, and basically it was austerity to 2015. Right? How do we balance the books? That has given us no bump at all in growth and basic, and certainly how do we include everyone in the economy? And I think that's what you're seeing in this budget. How do we make sure that we learn the lessons from COVID-19? The low wage earners, and make sure that they are protected at the base. They are less in a precarious position. Women as well as in the workforce, we're calling this a she recession. Youth as well that have paid dearly. Listen, anybody graduating from in April of last year from university or college came out in the workforce with their lives changed, right? There's certainly and the challenge that poses. So I think we're a lot of the measures in here is trying to make sure that we are lifting people up and not bringing people down. And so for me, again, having strong pillars, and again, looking at certainly the debt to GDP ratio, which would be 50 billion and going down, I think, and supporting Canadians in general, and again, trying to make our communities a better place to live for everyone, not because that's the other thing about the pandemic. Some people of our communities have really done well, and some people have done not well at all. And if we forget about the people that have not done well and not try to put better measures and public policy in place to address that, shame on us. And because guess what, next time it's going to come, or that's where we're starting to see movements in the States. I believe that basically then they start questioning politicians and the system. The system's not there for us; it's there for them, and then we get these conflicts. And so that's why you've seen the massive investments in the budget, and early childhood education. I know is one of the pillars, and the earlier that we can get good education to anyone, the better we are all off, and the payoff. It may not be when that kid is 3, 4, 5 years old, but maybe when they're 20, 25, and they are more solid individuals in the sense that they can participate in the economy and they've done well. And so that's kind of what a lot of the focus is on this budget.
Well, I have one more question about the budget.
Sure.
Something. Well, a couple of things. First of all, I was floored. I was floored when I heard progressive economist Jim Sanford describe the current conditions of interest in this country as negative.
Yes,
the negative interest rate. You actually, the more you borrow, the more money you get out of it, because if you invest now, it has immediate. That's like, so these conditions aren't everyday conditions. That's fascinating, and the question, the difficulty that I could see is how do you, it's not easy to make priorities, I think someone once said, and how do you decide, this, childcare over long-term care or pharmacare or other kinds
UBI.
of care, universal basic income. The goal is that I see it as you mentioned growth. I mean, this budget needs, in order to meet its projections, to raise the growth level in Canada beyond where most Western nations have been for years and years and years. How is so bringing it back home? Where are we going to see the growth here coming out of these big moves that are being made right now? Where's the growth in Sudbury?
Well, certainly labor participation, right? The more people you have participating in the economy, the more jobs you create, the more people will be coming here. And that's something, again, we have the jobs here. What is our strategy to attract workers and families to come to Sudbury to fill those jobs, right? I find that's something that we're missing here, because I talked about the supply issue of labor, right? What is the strategy that we need to have for the supply? Because the supply is there, and I think it's only going to grow. And if we do not have any strategy, it's going to go elsewhere. So we talk about growing our economy and growing our community, and then that allows us to invest in infrastructure. That allows us to dream of having a world-class city. We're missing, I think, is a strategy to make sure that we're be able to attract workers, entice workers to come into our community, because I really believe, given the shift of what's going on in the economy, we talk about clean tech, certainly the role of minerals and metals, and we have plenty of and more of here, and there's more exploration being done right now in the basin that we've ever seen in decades. So that's why I've been very bullish on our economy here. But I'm afraid, and I'm a big proponent of keeping as much of that transformation in Canada. Well, first in Sudbury, 2 in Ontario, 3 in Canada, as much as I can. I hate seeing any of our natural resources leaving our country after to be transformed somewhere else, and then we buy it back here. That's something that frustrates me. So how do we build the supply chains, right? Well, what supply chains can we build as much as we can here in our community? But at the same time, we won't be able to do that. So your question on growth is a very important one. So how do we go about to grow our economy here, grow our community for the better? And certainly, but I really think that we need to, as the jobs, as this budget, and as private enterprise will invest in those sectors, I truly believe that we need people to fill those jobs, and we need to have a strategy, or else it's up to the businesses on their own to scramble around Sudbury, around Ontario, around Canada, around the world. That's why you are more than aware of our pilot project on for immigrants, right? Which is great, right? Certainly to fill those jobs. It was slow to roll out in Sudbury. It's starting to pick up steam. And I recall, like we fought hard for that. We really fought hard for that to make sure that we were bringing in international, certainly immigrants to our country that want to work and want to participate. But that to me is one aspect. There are many people maybe around the country. Sudbury is a great place to live. I'm extremely proud, even though we're challenged times right now with COVID and Laurentian. I think it's a wonderful place to live for and raise a family, and it's certainly something that we should be screaming from the top of any hills that we have here in Sudbury, and certainly go around the world and to showcase that.
Awesome. Well, how about we get your crystal ball out for Sudbury? We know the NDP is looking for a new member. We still don't know who that's going to be.
Yep. Candidate. Yeah.
Candidate. And obviously somebody's got to replace you.
No one's got a candidate, right? No one's got there are no candidates in the Sudbury riding right now.
Nothing official. Yeah, nothing official, which is kind of bizarre, to be honest, because there's a lot of other ridings have already confirmed it.
And we could be in election now. Like, there aren't any candidates, and we could legitimately be on the hustle. So it is weird.
Yeah.
So, rumors?
No, I'm not going to get into names for sure. That is your job. Your job is to talk about these rumors and then say, well, Richard was right or Jeff was right, and you're both right or you're both wrong, right? And it's up to you to have fun with that. I'm not going to pine on, because at the end of the day, anybody who puts their name forward, right, that wants to serve and now wants to represent Sudbury, I have the utmost respect for. It's not an easy job, but it's a very rewarding job, and it's a very humbling job. And it's been, for me, it's been an honor to really represent it. It's tough to leave. I love the job. I really, like, for me, it's about finding results and how can I help my community as much as I can and to the best of my abilities. But now for me, it was time to move on. Certainly I'm looking at my family, at where they're at, certainly with their situation. I mean, teenagers, teenage boys, we want to make sure that they're successful. So I think me being around my wife, Lynn, works 12-hour days and she's extremely busy. So it was not fair for me to try to get another mandate for a possible 4 more years of leaving her running the household. So I thought that for me, it's time for somebody else, right? After 5.5 years, I don't mind. I'm very comfortable with that, with my decision. I don't have any regrets right until now. But I'll be around. I'll still live in Sudbury. We're not moving. I'm going to contribute as much as I can to my community and spend time with the family and continue on some of the projects that I have.
And maybe someday we'll see your name on a ballot some other place, some other time.
But on that, there's a lot of people that are interested in politics that watch our show. There's not a lot of people that have been MP. It's a very unique position. I've been friends with a few. What are the things that you would tell somebody that's considering this type of job, expectations that you had going in that may not have been what you thought they'd be, or things that they should know before they start?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think when you're certainly for the MP for Sudbury, other than me and Glenn Thibault, that was an MP back from 2008 to 2015, we're the only two alive. I mean, we think about that, right? Diane Marler passed away, and before that, and it was Diane was there for such a long time. Doug Frith and Jim Jerome. So yeah, there's only really 2 living members that can say that they've had the title of MP for Sudbury. One of the things, listen, I knew going in, I had pretty good, clear expectations of what the job entailed and leaving home and being there, and the job is what I find most tough sometimes is to hurry up and wait, right? Hurry up, get to your seat, get there right now. We got to get you there. Oh, and then you wait for an hour, 2 hours, but you got to be there. And for me, with my background, it's really tough as I've tried to be extremely as productive as I can with my time, because the only thing I have to give is my time, right? So that was a bit of an adjustment with respect to hurry up and wait. It's a really, in the balance of certainly what you want to do as an individual and the whole team aspect, right? You're part of a team. Right, you are the member problem for Sudbury. That's first and foremost. But at the same time, you're part of a team, and then there's dynamics there that you may not agree with. But it's for me, being part of the Liberal team was actually an amazing experience. I've experienced so many things that are not known to the public. The conversations we've had, so I think there's so many levels. Certainly, the role here in Sudbury as the MP and the role in Ottawa as the MP as well, and how you can influence things. So I think that anybody wanted to do the job, there was a lot of sacrifice. I missed my daughter's graduation. I missed my son going to the cadets biathlon championship and winning the gold at a national level. I missed that, right? So yeah, there's a lot of sacrifice, but there's a lot of rewards. So you got to be prepared to live that stress. And for me, the biggest stress was when I'm with my family. I am stressed that I'm not with my community. When I'm with the community, I'm stressed because I'm not with the family. So I guess that's a good balance to have, but that was always a challenge that you have, because certainly both are very important to me. But so yeah, so there's that balancing that you need to be aware of coming in, and being, to accept that you're going to go through those stresses, and so if you're okay with that, and if you made your peace with those stresses, and when they do roll around, saying this is the life, and this is what this was to be expected. And I kind of had prepared myself mentally for that going in.
It's a great question, Jeff. A great answer, Paul. I'm sure that people are going to be rewinding that and listening to it a couple of times if they're thinking
They're
about
interested.
thinking about your course of action.
Yeah.
And we really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. It was a great hour. Really covered the big issues that are going on right now, and including sort of this transition that you're in, kind of slowly, or whenever the case may be, maybe October 26th, if under the right circumstances for you and others in your situation. But listen, we really appreciate your time. Wish you all the best. Jeff, any last words?
No, really glad to have you here. The only last question I had is, are we going to be door knocking for the federal election?
Good question. Really good question. Listen, and it all depends on the teams. We had by-elections, and some parties were knocking on doors. I know the Liberals were not. So that will be really, really interesting times. And if you do so, how do you do it safely? Can you ask your volunteers to do that? Should that just be the candidate doing that himself or herself? And so, great question. Those are actually live questions in all the parties, right? How you go, because I as you know, I don't want to get too much into elections. That making phone calls now is a lot tougher. People have canceled their
home phones.
Their home phones, exactly. So I think that's good. That's more of a challenge than before. I remember in 2015, I had started knocking on doors in May for the October election. I probably knocked on the most doors ever by anybody in Sudbury, I think, anyways, because I've knocked on. There's not a corner of our community that I do not know of my writing. I went to all corners of my writing, and so it was extremely, extremely rewarding to see the good and certainly the sad, and that was so important to me to see that the reality. And actually, I had brought my kids with me as well, and certainly in some tougher corners, and I really wanted to see the reality of what people live out there, and that's kind of what motivated me to run in the first place. How can I help, right? How can I contribute, and how can I help? And but great question, Jeff. The parties are going to decide, and it also depends regionally, right? If there's a lot of low case count, people will not be afraid, but if there are high case counts, that will be very tough.
All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us. We hope to have you back.
Sure.
At some point.
Yeah.
One of the politicians that I find really interesting to watch sometimes, Preston Manning. He was on a stage talking about environmental issues, and somebody said, "How can you be so environmentally forward when your party is so behind?" He said, "Well, every politician doubles in smartness the day they retire."
Well, thank you, Jeff. That's very kind. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to the day that I'll be doubling my intelligence. That's awesome. I like that.
Yeah. So it would be great to have you back in the future.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. Take care.
Cheers.
Thanks so much for tuning in. Now, share your thoughts. Go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/SudburyPolitics. Let us know what you thought about the episode, and share with your friends so they can share their thoughts too. We're so glad you joined us, and we hope you tune in again for Sudbury Politics, the show.